borders of Earth. Now, there's several that we're probably familiar with, like the Predicstool at Langebahn, the caldera of the volcano at Santorini in Greece, the Sugarloaf Mountain in Rio, in Brazil, the coral colonies of the Great Barrier Reef, these tall limestone towers of Meteora in northern Greece, and this remnant of a volcano which is found off the west coast of Scotland called Ailsa Craig. So these are shapes you may be familiar with, and what I'm going to be looking at may be ones you're not familiar with or less familiar with. Our first feature is from our own continent. This is actually this red lake is called Lake Natron, and it's in Tanzania. The lake is located right in the northern part of the country and actually crosses the Kenyan border slightly, but it's considered to be a Tanzanian lake. It does produce this phenomenal red coloring, which in fact is also evidenced in the colors on the flamingos, which actually find this lake quite friendly and helpful to them as a source of food. It's actually a salt and soda lake on the eastern branch of the East African Rift, at about an elevation of about 600 meters. Fairly shallow, with a water depths of under 3 meters. But crucially, one of its important features is its water temperatures often exceed 40 degrees. So this is not a cool site, even though maybe it's some elevation. Its length varies depending on rainfall and inflow. So maximum length 57 kilometers and by about 22. Evaporation over time, as we can see, the water temperatures get high, so then the local air temperature will also be high. And evaporation has left deposits of natron and tronin deposits behind. And the alkalinity can reach pHs of over 12, which is very, very salty. On that basis, it's also something that is only habitable to certain life forms, and these are called halophiles, which are extremophiles, which actually like salt. And the important ones here are these ancient cyanobacteria, and it's their activities which releases or creates this red coloring. There's a red accessory photosynthesizing pigment in their bodies, which produces the deep red color. And as I already alluded, it's going to be very hostile to virtually all animal life, but flamingos love it. They actually arrive in thousands, and it's one of the sources of their pink coloring is the red from this lake. Unfortunately, as is often the case, the lake and the fauna are being threatened by human activity of various kinds, and things like that also obviously affect the water levels. Moving a little further north, this very odd looking feature is in Norway, and it's called Bolton, and it's got this very strange looking object. We've got this round rock caught between these two very long rocks. It's actually located on Lysefjorden in the southwest corner of Norway. So there are several fjords in this area, but Lysefjorden has two famous rock formations. This is what to me is a more interesting one. It also has the Preikestolen, which is like the Predicstool in Langebahn, but about 1,000 feet or 900 meters rather above water level. There's some pictures to show what it looks like. I don't think the sheep actually really stood on here, but I rather like the view. I think there's been a bit of photoshopping, but it's appealed to me. As you can see, it's accessible to people, although I'm not sure I'd be terribly happy to be jumping on a round rock 1,000 meters above the water, but it's a very popular tourist attraction. The boulder is about 5 cubic meters in volume, and it's made of granite, and it is wedged in a crevice on the edge of this granite mountain on the edge of the fjord. It's suspended about 984 meters above sea level. So you've got to have a very good head for heights. It was deposited, they estimate, around 50,000 years ago during the last ice age. And the question is, how did something which at the bottom ended up nearly 1,000 meters up, that's almost the height of Table Mountain, up water levels? And the story is that as the glaciers, which actually formed and filled the fjord, retreated, two things happened. One, water levels rose, seawater levels rose as the ice melted, and objects being carried in that water or being moved in that by the water, for instance, rock, were being tossed around. The other thing is that as the ice disappeared, the loss of the weight of the ice meant that the ground started rising, and you get this issue of this feature of land or glacial rebound. And basically, what happened with this rock is it got caught in the rebound. It got wedged in the land, and as the land has rebounded over the last centuries, it's moved up and up and up to where it is today. It's a temporary phenomenon because obviously the rock is slowly eroding, and being in that part of Norway, there's a lot of freeze-thaw weathering. As you can see, it's easily available, it's accessible easily on foot. If you climb down here. And as I mentioned earlier, this and the nearby Preikestolen, which is basically just a large shelf protruding out of the fjord, are very popular with both visitors and base jumpers. This structure is actually located off the coast of Asia. It's actually found in Taiwan. It's known as the Nanya Rock. Well, this area is located in the northeast corner of the island. I couldn't find a map with actually identifying the exact location, but it would be in this area. And it's one of several unusual rock formations we find in the area. The result of erosion of sandstone cliffs in this area. Taiwan has heavy rain, heavy tropical rain, and also there's obviously being on the coast, there's a lot of wave action. And the eroded rock itself is quite young, at about 1 to 3 million years. And the geological by tectonic activity form, a series of cliffs. And then the rock itself eroded over time by wave action and rainfall over the last thousands of years. The coloring, the reddish
Jenny,
pink
can we just pause for a second? Jenny?
Yeah?
Sorry, can we just pause for a second? The sound, occasionally it's fine and then it just completely goes away for half the sentence. Have you got any other programs open which are connected to the internet at the moment? Or
no,
any
nothing else.
Browsers or email or anything? Nothing?
No, nothing else, I'm afraid, Derek.
I don't know if you can maybe just try and speak a little slower. I don't know. But the sound is not good at all. We'll have to find another solution before we do this again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, fortunately, all the information is on the screen. All the information is on the screen as well, so hopefully people can fill in the gaps.
Yeah. Okay.
The rock eroded a few thousand years, and as I said, the colors come basically from iron oxide, which interacts or is affected by exposure to oxygen and water and forms a reddish color. The area is very popular because it's very accessible, but the coastline is dangerous and there is a history of drownings. But it is certainly an unusual feature in that area, in that country. Very unusual are these lumpy rock formations, which one actually finds in Cuba. They're called Las Organas, which in fact is the area. Las Organas is the national park in which you find these. So they're located in the western side of Cuba, west of Havana, in this national park area. And you can see they have very distinctive characteristics, high structures, very vertical walls. It's a tropical area, very green, a lot of vegetation, and in this valley, which is very rich in agricultural productivity. So it's a very wet area. And this is the source of existence. These are limestone structures which have been eroded by tropical weather and climate. So they're actually a form of karst limestone erosion. The valley itself is about 130 square meters. And within that valley, these limestone cliffs rise, this very flat valley floor. And the name for this formation are Curvaceous. They rise up to 300 meters. And as I mentioned, are the result of centuries of limestone by water dissolving, the normal process of limestone erosion. Only Curvaceous are features only found in regions of subtropical or tropical rainfall. So they're not found in other areas in this shape. They have a wide variety of shapes, as you can see from the pictures here, but they generally are features of very tall vertical sides and rounded tops. And as I said, they're actually located in a very rich agricultural area, very fertile land. People may recognize this, but I could not put it in because it is just stunning. This is Antelope Canyon in Arizona in the USA. And if you remember the structures up in the Eastern Transvaal at HAC, the origins are similar, although the setting is completely different. Antelope Canyon is between the Grand Canyon area and Monument Valley, just near the border with Utah. This whole area is filled with wonderful rock, geological, erosional features. And photographers, as you can see, just love this place. It's an amazing site. And you can see all these layers, very thin layers of sandstone, which have been eroded. One of the other features they have is these beams of sunlight which come through at certain times of day and at certain times of the year. It was an example of a slot canyon, which are relatively uncommon and occur mostly in the southwestern part of the USA. And they're found in arid sandstone areas. And they're generally a result of the effect of rocks knocking against the walls when you've got rushing sediment-laden water, and they are often caused by flash floods. The white color ranges are as a result of about 190 million years of chemical alteration by groundwater of minerals, particularly iron oxide, which produces the pinks and the reddish colors. There are two canyons. The upper one is the most popular, which is this one here. So it has an entrance at ground level. It extends to about 200 meters and is also ground level. So it's the more accessible of the two. It tends to have more beams of radiating sunlight and is therefore a sort of popular tourist site, whereas the lower canyon is separate from it. It's longer, deep, and access to it is more difficult. It involves stairs, there's climbing, areas of climbing, and there's a lot of infalling sand, so it's not very safe. But the pictures are just amazing that you can find of Antelope Canyon. This is taken at a cave in New Zealand. As a cave, this is not an unusual cave, but it's what you find inside the cave which makes it special. These are the Waitomo Caves, which are located on the North Island south of Auckland. And what they're famous for is this light, this naturally produced light, which is produced by an animal, which I'll go into more detail in a moment. So as caves, they're not particularly special, but what's inside them is amazing. I've been here, and it's an incredible experience. So that's a solutional cave system, essentially limestone that it's formed from, is deposited about 30 million years ago, and the caves are about 64 million years old, or began forming then. The temperatures are relatively constant, 12 to 14 degrees all year round, and that's one reason for their attraction for these animals. The records show that they were first discovered in the 1880s by a Maori chief, and they've started to be opened to tourists much early on, considering 1889 is quite early times in New Zealand. The source of the light are glowworms, which are the larvae of an endemic New Zealand gnat species. They spend most of their lives as larvae and grow to about a matchstick size, so that's a couple of centimeters. The visible glow is emitted from luminescence in their tails, so they hang from the roof of the cave, and their tails hang down. And they produce chemicals which react with the oxygen in the air, and that generates the light. And this light attracts insects to sticky threads, which the gnats have spun from the roof next to their bodies. So it's basically, this is just an insect trap or food source. And the caves are an ideal location for all this to go on because they're suitably cool and damp, they're dark and sheltered, and the slow-moving river that passes through it is a source of insects for food. So it's an ideal habitat for these larvae. But they do produce the most amazing light effects. If you travel through these, you're not allowed to actually take a camera because obviously flashes go off, it ruins everything and upsets the animals. So these would be professional pictures or permitted pictures. These might look very ordinary, but these are almost unique features, and they're found right at the bottom end of South America. These are so-called stone runs found on the Falkland Islands, which are located, they're British territories located right down here near Argentina. You may remember there was a war over them in the 1980s. Interesting just to bear in mind that before Gondwana broke up, the Falkland Islands were just off the Gullis. And when the North Atlantic formed, the plateau on which they exist actually moved away with South America. But geologically speaking, they actually originated around here. I had difficulty finding photographs here because this is not a hugely visited area, but you can see literally these almost streams of what are rocks across the surface of the islands. And close up, they're also interesting, which I'll go to in a moment. And as you can see, it's just rubble. There's not like a normal river where there's sand that holds the stones in place. They just are literally streams or rivers of stones. An example of what are called block fields or block streams, and they are rare. In fact, with one exception, they are unique in the world. And they're associated with glaciation, but they're not produced by glaciers. They're periglacial. They are produced in a glacial environment, directly linked with glaciers. They're accumulations of rocks with no finer material, so no sand to hold them together. And what the process isn't fully understood, but what they think is that a result of repeated freeze-thaw cycles, whereby the rocks break off, and then if the ground is saturated, it becomes slippery. And if the rocks are on a smallish, low enough slope, they actually slide down this, and over time form these streams of rocks. Something else in the process which also facilitates their movement is that if the ground then hardens, it swells as ice expands, and that continues to move the rocks down the hill. The length of these is up to 5 kilometers, so they're substantial. They're very angular, they're not rounded like river rocks are. They flow down these gentle slopes, but they forming these rivers. In the Falklands, the ground slopes 1 to 10 degrees, so they're relatively not flat, but not very steep. And the diameter of the streams varies between 1 meter and up to nearly half a kilometer. The rocks are quartz, and the strange thing with these, apart from where they come from, is that unlike in a river where the larger objects stop first, and the lighter sediments are dropped later. The opposite is true here. The larger rocks are found uppermost, and the smaller ones are deeper. Despite the fact that there's nothing holding them together, they're actually very stable, and people can walk and climb on them without causing, having problems. As I said, the processes are poorly understood. They reckon that to have formed during the last ice age between 18 and 10,000 years ago. They were first reported by a French expedition in 1763. And in fact, Charles Darwin climbed over these in 1834 when he was there on the Beagle. He called them streams of stones, was very impressed with them because he had this interest in geology. Another rock formation is very different. I don't know what you see when you look at these, but I see a bear having a little conversation with a lion. This is a structure called the Rock Bonanza on one of the islands in the Canary Islands off the northwest coast of Africa. Just to give you some location, here's the Canaries. And what we're looking at is El Hierro, which is the lower left hand of the Canary Islands. And on that, the Bonanza Rock is just off the coast. As you can see, it's quite close to the coastline. And you get different views, obviously, depending on where you take the photographs from, but most of them are taken with this view that, as I say, to me, looks like a bear having a chat with a lion. Actually, a basalt rock formation, an erosional remnant. The only information I could find on this was that they rise about 200 meters from the seafloor, but I don't know how deep the sea is. But an estimate is that these are probably somewhere between 10 and 15 meters high from the sea level, which obviously varies by tides. Now, the islands of the Canaries were formed over a hotspot, a bit like Hawaii is. And this activity started about 60 million years ago. And most of these islands are still active with earthquakes and occasional eruptions. El Hierro is the smallest, most southerly and westerly, as I pointed out on the map down here, and most remote and least visited of the Canary Islands. The island is reckoned to have formed about 1.2 million years ago, so it's relatively young. And its height originally was probably around 2,000 meters and has eroded down to about 1,500. Interestingly, the island is also known as the Isla de Meridiano, because for centuries it was used as the prime meridian outside the British Empire, because it was the most westerly point of the known world. The whole island is a UNESCO biosphere, with its famous flora and fauna both above and below the sea. On the actual formation, there's a volcanic, the jetty is sometimes used as a diving access point to look at the underwater flora and fauna. So I'll be interested to know whether anyone else sees any other animals having a little chat in the bay there. This is a structure some people may have visited if they've been to Australia. It's a structure called Wave Rock, and it's located in Western Australia. And it's very, very different from what we've just been talking about. Wave Rock is about 300 kilometers east of Perth. It's a long drive, but worth the effort. And you can see where it gets its name from, and there you can see a lot of people posing as if this actually is a wave. So its shape is very eponymous as a wave. If you look at these pictures, you can see it's not unique. There are other these are large granite structures in the area. So it's one of at least three. Those with you look, this structure here running across the top is in fact a rather ugly concrete wall to take rainwater off that into a dam for the local people to use as a water source. You can't see that wall from the bottom, but when you can, it's not very pretty. But it does provide water in a dry area. The wall itself is about, wave rock's about 110 meters long and between 12 and 15 meters high. And it is an excellent example of what's called a flared slope, which is, as you can see here, a concave inward shape. And these formations are unusual, and in fact, there are not many in the world. An example in Western Australia is probably one of the best in the world. And often they tend to be found on some of these isolated mounds or inselbergs, which are just rocks standing above the local ground level. They actually formed, the curvature is formed while the rock is partially buried, where water seeps down through the surrounding soil and stone and pools at the base of the rock and then chemically undermines the granite. And when the rock is then exposed by erosion, you end up with this slope. The amazing thing about wave rock is not just what it looks like, is its age. This rock is 2.63 billion years old. This is seriously old rock. I've climbed up here and something thinking of walking on rock that old, probably the oldest rock I've ever walked on. So the granite actually forms underground, as granite usually does, about 10 kilometers deep, and then later is exposed by erosion. And on its way up, the slope is formed as water seeps down. The rusty red and dark vertical streaks are actually algae that grow on the wall, and the color changes depending on the season. And when the algae dies, it drops off and you get the sort of a new rock being exposed, the light streaks. So it never looks the same. The rock formation is the same, but the actual appearance differs every time you see it. Now we moved up to almost the other side of the world to you may not be surprised to know that the structure is called a flower pot, because it has that rather distinctive shape. In fact, there are two flower pots. They are located in the Great Lakes area on this top end of the Spruce Peninsula, just northwest of Toronto, on a little island called Flower Pot Island. Now, sea stacks are not unusual. I'm sure we've all seen pictures of sea stacks. The unusual thing is here that we have a stack which is not in the ocean. This is in a freshwater lake. So they're unusual in that regard. There are two of them, and they even have plants on them to show you that they actually really do support flowers. So, as I say, they're named for the eponymous rocks. The island is named for that. The third stack collapsed in 1903, so there are only two left, the tallest being 12 meters high and the small one being 9 meters high. They're actually made of limestone called dolomite. Now, the dolomite was laid 400 million years ago when what is now Canada was actually was in the warm seas over near the equator, and the limestone was laid down in the normal way from shells of animals. As the sea dried, the magnesium in the water filtered into the soft material, hardening it to dolomite. And obviously over the centuries, the world moved northwards. Now, the stacks are formed as wind, rain, waves, and ice. This area was covered in ice during the last ice age and eroded the cliffs. And you get a normal pattern here where you get harder rock at the top, therefore protecting the softer rock, and you end up with this sort of V-shaped formation. The interesting thing here is that, and although the Great Lakes are large, they don't have continuous wave action. The tidal change is only about 5 centimeters. It's nothing like the sea. And there are very powerful storms in winter, which obviously would then help to erode it. But what's really caused this sort of pattern of lowering erosion, as it obviously started here, and the erosion is lowering, is not so much, is because of the land rebuilding. When the glaciers melted, as was in Norway, the land started rising. And so over time, more and more of this part of the cliff and this part of the flower plots was exposed and is now forming these structures. There has been a bit of cheating here. There has been some put down around the bases and to some extent at the top to try and reduce the rate of erosion, because these are very popular as a tourist attraction. You can see all the people doing this. So there's a bit of cheating going on, but the processes are still natural. South in North America is this amazing structure called, snakes, for obvious reasons. It's very tight. Here in Utah, not far, in fact, from what we looked at earlier with Antelope Canyon. What we're looking at, the location of these is actually just into Utah. Antelope Canyon's down here. Goose snakes are found here on a river called the San Juan, which runs across southern Utah. And what we're looking at is this area here, with this cut of meanders and cornering. Oops. So you can see on the of this really complex meandering that the river follows. And that's created these amazing things, amazing curves. And the goosenecks is one of the best examples of what's called an entrenched or incised meander. Still hear me? Derek, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I've just had a sign to say that the connection is poor. I'll keep going. So it's a very good example of an incised meander. It's almost as if the river's literally cut straight down. Most meanders, if we think about river meanders, they often sort of curve gently along a very flat plane. This is a very different example. It's a river moving, but it's because of uplift of the land under the water. The river's actually eroded very vertically downwards, and you end up with this canyon with very evenly angled walls. The river incised into the rock as the land was uplifted. They increase about 9 loops of varying tightness, as you can see here. Some of them are very tight, others are more open. And in all, this river, this part of the river, if you stretch it out, it'd be about 8.5 kilometers, but it only travels about 1.5 kilometers in an actual distance. So that is an extreme example. In depth, up to 300 meters. And so the oldest rocks are at the bottom, also 300 million years old, and we go up to the top here, about 1 million years old. And the elevation at the rim is about 1,500 meters. So it's part of the Colorado Plateau, which is rising, and this keeps rising with it. Just out of interest, I found this information about this Uvka River Gorge, which is a similar, as you can see, smaller, and interestingly, it's formed in limestone, not in sandstone. The processes are similar. If you're ever in Serbia, worth a visit. Now, this is not photoshopped, Chris. This amazing site is what is known as Carno Cristales, and it's found in Colombia, in the northwestern part of South America, almost in the middle of the country. And I think the name probably is translates as the River of Crystals. And these are the colors that you see at certain times of year. It's surprising to discover that it's also known as the River of 5 Colors, the liquid rainbow, etc., etc. It's in a very remote area, which is probably good because it's less likely to be damaged. On the edge of this La Macarena National Park. The color is actually produced by algae, which live on the riverbed. And from June to October, the riverbed turns these amazing colors of red, yellow, green, blue, etc., that you see in the pictures here. Now the water is fast flowing and clear, and is usually lined with dull green moss, so it's not interesting. But between the wet and dry seasons, more sunlight reaches the riverbed, and large volumes of this endemic plant, Macarenia clavigera, I think, and produce these local colors. So it's a temporary phenomenon every year. This area was closed off because of guerrilla activities during drug wars, etc. in the past. But in 2009 was reopened to visitors after years of guerrilla activity and concerns about human impact. And this now is by horseback and foot and has to be done with a registered guide. So it's actually it's carefully protected now. But it is the most amazing structure or feature. A little less colourful, but also visually impressive is this feature, which is called Split Apple Rock and is located in New Zealand. It's found right up in the north off the coast of the Abel Tasman National Park, which occupies this area, the top end of New Zealand. As you can see, it's quite near the coast, and you can get out there. If so, you can actually wade out, or more popularly, people go out in kayaks. Maori name, which I won't try and pronounce, means open rock, so it's a fairly literal naming. It was first formally named as Split Apple Rock in 1988, but in 2014, the structure was given a bilingual renaming, so it is Split Apple Rock and the Maori name. The granite boulder is about 120 million years old, and for completely unpredictable reasons, the result of ice wedging, so ice water freezing in a narrow natural crevice, and it just so happens that it split the rock into almost equal parts. It's not known when the cooling occurred, but it's possibly related to an ice age. As I said, accessible meters off the coast, accessible by wading or on watercraft, especially kayaks. The Maori legend about this is not interesting. They often have very, very interesting legends about two powerful brothers fighting over ownership who agreed to split it into two halves. So it's a nice legend, but not as interesting as some of the other Maori legends. This structure is across the Tasman Sea in Australia, called in Tasmania. I shall just show you the geography. So Tasmania, the island of eastern coast of Tasmania is this island called Maria Island, and the cliffs are located on the southern edges here. Maria Island is now mostly a nature, but it has a rather one. It was actually used as a penal colony. There was a small penal settlement there. It is now a protected reserve. These phenomenal colors. And the interesting thing with these is not what we normally see with colored rocks. We often see strata, a bit like a layer cake, everything horizontal. What you're seeing here is colors that are symmetrical. Because the sources of the colors is not just horizontal layers. They're actually sort of it's an onion-shaped arrangement of coloring rather than a series of layers. So they're called sandstone cliffs, and the rocks were laid down about 250 to 200 million years ago. At the moment, the rocks are being eroded by wave action and wind, which is exposing these existing patterns, these colors. So they contain this impressive pattern, there should be patterns of red, orange, and yellow, so-called Liesegang patterns and rings. These patterns, as I said, are almost onion-like. So you've got inner things surrounded by outer shells and layers and layers. And as the cliff is eroded, the layers are shown. The mechanism for formation of Liesegang is not fully understood. But they think they're a result of precipitation, of rain, groundwater, interacting chemically with iron in the rock, but they really don't understand how it's produced these concentric ring-like structures rather than just more horizontal patterns. And one possibility is that it is a result of a form of geochemical self-organization, where different minerals are associated with different precipitation rates, so you get more coloring in some areas than other. As I said earlier, the colors no doubt were formed ages ago, and it's just the erosion which is exposing them. So just sorry, these sort of symmetrical patterns that you see rather than the normal horizontal ones. It's quite soft rock, so it actually is eroding. The area is fairly inaccessible. It's protected quite well from too many people getting to it. We've talked about limestone formations, and we're all familiar with limestone. This is huge. This is the Vet cave. Little person, to give you some idea of the scale, looking at this is a massive cave system. It's located in the northern part of the country, and some of the you can see the area has a lot of eroded limestone. So this is another form of karst formation. Huge entrance, and again, how small people are, and it has natural lighting. So this is a large, very large cave, karst cave, which has been known to have been inhabited by humans for at least 70,000 years. It goes back a long, long way in terms of human habitation. It's also home to several fauna species, including 30,000, at least 30,000 bats, which come out every night, as bats do. Its overall length is about 2.5 kilometers. The dissolution of the rock limestone by water has formed sinkholes, underground river, all the features are there. The entrance itself is 30 meters high and 35 meters wide. Just that structure. It'll give you some idea of the scale. The large main hall, an area of around 2.5 square kilometers, it's huge, with an average height of 60 to 100 meters. And it's lit by no fewer than 7 openings. And naturally, rainfall gets in, and it's a fairly tropical, subtropical, wet atmosphere, and you get growth. You get plant growth, and in fact, historically, people who lived in these caves actually grew. And more recently, 70,000 years, but there is evidence of agriculture in the inside as well. The cave branches at about 200 meters. One branch contains the river, which runs through it. Oh, sorry. It was rediscovered in 1921, and in the 1950s, archaeological studies confirmed the historic human habitation. It was used for the site or location for this film, which I haven't seen, called The Expendables, which highlighted the fact that this is a very, very delicate, fragile atmosphere. The film impact of the actual filming was negative on the environment, so authorities access to be used for filming for the damage. So it's maybe large, aggressive, but it's actually quite a fragile environment, which is now protected. This structure, I think, certainly when it was first discovered or first came to light, those are people who seek evidence of alien invasion of Earth said this is used by aliens. Actually, an underwater sand circle, which is found off the coast of Japan, under the sea. They are found off the islands, these islands off the south coast of Japan, called Amami Oshima. And they are the most extraordinary shape. You can see a diver here, give you an idea of the scale. And they're not created by aliens, they're actually produced by these little fish. And I'll explain the mechanism in a moment. In 1995, they were first seen by local divers off the island. And in 2011, they were finally actually formally researched by scientists. And the first professional images were taken in 2012. The sea level is about, the base of the sea is about 24 meters below the sea level. The circles are about 2 meters in diameter, and they're actually created by these small male fish, which are about 13 centimeters in length. And they create these amazing shapes in all of 9 days. And it's and their fins create, here you've got a picture of one at work, and their fins create these valleys and ridges. Can you still hear me? Derek?
The sound is very bad now, Jenny. I only hear about a quarter of what you're saying.
Okay, well, I've just had a warning that the signal is low, but I'll keep going. You can read this as well. They swim repeatedly in and out, their fins creating valleys and ridges, and when the female approaches, the male stirs up the sand in the center. She's impressed. She lays her eggs in this area, and then the eggs are protected from the currents by these ridges and valleys. The upkeep of the sand circles falls after mating, and in fact the circles are abandoned after the new fish have, or the young fish have hatched. These could be alien structures, but they're on Earth. They are what are known as hoodoos, and these are located in a reserve in America, New Mexico, called the Bisbee or Denison Badlands. Here's New Mexico, and the area of the reserve, it's not a national park, is located roughly around here. And hoodoos are essentially structures where you have layers of material and the layers are hard and they protect the lower layers from erosion. You get the same canyon. But these are really otherworldly in shape. Some of them actually manage to defy gravity. I don't know. I've did 2 pages of these because they're so impressive. But eventually, as you can see here, the bases do eventually give way and the top collapses down. So this is a very remote area in the high desert wilderness, and the area of the reserve was formally named in 1984. It's actually located in a valley area below the surrounding grassy plains, and it's at quite high altitude. About 70 million years ago, a swampy river delta existed in this area on the edge of an inland sea, and the layers of sediment were laid down. These were later covered by volcanic ash from nearby volcanic eruptions. The area was lifted with the Colorado Plateau about 25 million years ago. But while deep underground, water leached into the ash and hardened the limestone layers, creating a hard limestone layer. And erosion, these structures were released into fresh air, and they've been eroded into hoodoos, initially by water from ice age melting. But these days they are melted or eroded by wind and rain, but probably mostly by wind. The ash is easily eroded, and this would no longer exist if it wasn't for these hard limestone which protect it. So these are the heavy, solid, hard material that's actually protecting the soft ash underneath them. Now, in the last synopsis, I said that you would see something which would blow your mind. And I've kept the best till last, because it should blow your mind. This is real. This is not a Salvador Dali painting. It's not somebody high on anything. This is a real structure. These are salt mine caves. found underneath the city of Yekaterinburg in Russia. Now, it's not unusual for salt mines to have interesting colors and swirly shapes and to reveal them when the salt is mined, but this is phenomenal. Yekaterinburg is located in the Asian part of Russia, many kilometers east of Moscow. The name rings a bell. This is where the Romanov family were under house arrest and where they were later murdered in 1917, I think it was. The colors are used to describe these are things like psychedelic. Signs of mechanical intervention on the mining equipment, and these ridges and hollows just adds to the whole effect. So these are huge, almost fully abandoned salt mine under the city. In 2014, a Russian photographer first revealed them to the world and described them as surreal, weird, psychedelic. They're deep underground, about 220 meters, the mine. And it's a huge mine, extensive. One tunnel extends over 6.5 kilometers. The colored stripes are layers of natural carnallite, mineral found in marine salt deposits. And the existence of these salt deposits is a result, and the coloring is a result of alteration of pre-existing salt deposited in a sea, which dried up millions of years ago, because you wouldn't expect to find a huge salt mine in the middle of a massive continent. So the salt was deposited about 280 million years ago, and obviously over time, but they found these salt deposits. The colors vary from yellow to cream, white to red, also some blues. If I go back, whoops, you see the whole range of colors. The mine is dangerous and access is only by government permit. So the photographer get permission, he was taken in. It's very, very humid. And there are some dangerous areas. So you have to be very carefully monitored for safety. Those are the further curvaceous wonders. I'm sorry about the sound, but hopefully you've been able to read as much as I've been able to say, and also been able to see the pictures. I'll quickly run through the pictures just to remind you what we've seen. So we started with Lake Natron, a soda lake, alkaline lake in Tanzania. We then went into this bizarre rock, which is being held up about 1,000 meters above the water in Norway. Nanya rock, eroded sandstone in Taiwan. These unusual limestone or karst rock formations in Cuba with very vertical walls. Antelope Canyon and the effect of stones filling the canyons during flash floods and eroding these wonderful shapes. The Waitomo caves with their famous glowworms, which they use to attract insects for food. Rivers of rocks in the Falkland Islands. Erosional remnants in the Canary Islands with interesting looking shapes. One interesting looking shape. Ancient rock in Australia, which has been eroded to form this flared slope. Flower pots found on a lake, a sea stack found in a lake in Canada, and largely existing because of land rebound as the glacial, after glacial activity, and the land is rising now that the weight of the ice is gone. Goosenecks in Utah, produced by the river incising downwards as the land is lifted. The incredible colors of the Carnocrystallis in Colombia, produced by algae. Granite rocks almost into two equal halves, simply by where a weakness was, and the effects of ice and free thawing. Cliffs with these interesting onion shaped systems which are revealed by the erosion. So you get rings, symmetrical pattern of rock colors. Massive limestone cave in Bulgaria. Underwater sand circles in Japan, which are so recent, have been so recently discovered, I had difficulty finding information about it. These strange hoodoos in New Mexico. Finally, the psychedelic mines in Russia. I hope that despite the technical problems, you've enjoyed what we've seen tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Jenny. And I have been recording this, so if anybody wants to have a look at it again on the recording, they can just contact me. I don't think I'll be uploading it to YouTube because of the soundtrack, but I have recorded it.
Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Jenny, it's very impressive. You said they're not stock images, but where do you find them, especially such high quality pictures? How do you find them?
Well, basically, if you look for images on the internet, you'll find hundreds, and I not use stock ones. You find the stock ones have logos over them and things like that because they are commercial. So I try not to.
Sorry, why don't you just stop your share so we can hear your sound better?
I'll just close it. Share.
Yeah.
Has it gone?
Yeah, that's better.
Is that better? So I just find, these are stock images. Obviously, if they're online, you can download them, you can access them, but they're not commercial. So, I don't theoretically want to, pay people for them. And they're very, very good pictures because it's not. If I can find a good quality, amateur, then I'll use them as a preference. But sometimes the good small ones you can't enlarge because the pixel number's too low.
Yeah.
So I've tended to have to use the stock pictures to get the sort of bigger pictures to get the sort of big visual impact. But I do avoid them if I can.
And how do you do your research? It's fantastic.
Well, the internet, a couple of places I was aware of, some I've picked up on programs, but mostly you just search on the internet for geological wonders or, wonderful caves and things. There's just the most incredible amount of information. Sometimes there's stuff, but there's just no information about it. It's either too remote or people just say, well, there are only about 3 pictures. But generally, the internet is the most amazing resource. And there are a lot of websites that have pulled together, the 21 greatest geological sites or the world's best ever. And you just trawl. Great fun. I love geology. So it's a lot of work, but I love doing it. I've really enjoyed it. And I've also come across things afterwards, like the sand circles. I only came across in the last year or so, and I actually took another less interesting one out and put those in. So you've got to I keep an ear open or an eye open for anything else that crops up that's new.
Well, I think this is quite amazing, Jenny. And your presentations are getting better and better. So hopefully this is a 24 series. And
not that many, not that many, Peter. Thank you very much. Not that many, but I do have a couple more.
Thank you, Jenny, from Benny.
Thank you, Benny. I'm pleased you enjoyed it. I hope you got it despite the technical problems.
Yes, I did. Thanks very much.
Good.
Yes, that was very good. I like that.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Laura. I'll see you on Friday.
Is it okay? Is it on?
Well, I'll check the weather tomorrow and then we'll let people know. But perfect. Fingers crossed.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I hope so.
Okay.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jenny. That was lovely. Thanks.
You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
That was great. Thanks, yeah. Bye. Bye-bye. Very good.
Okay, thanks. Anybody, any more questions? Thanks very much, Jenny.
Not at all. Thank you very much for hosting the session, Derek, and for introducing me.
Okay. I'm going to end the session now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye.